You're watching The Legal Breakdown. Glenn, all eyes right now are on this Signal group chat scandal that has consumed this White House. A lawsuit was immediately filed. The lawsuit was brought in front of Judge Bosberg in federal court. We now have the first move by Bosberg. Can you explain what just happened?
Yeah, Brian, this one might surprise people because in court, in a 20-minute hearing, the parties, meaning the people who brought the lawsuit, American Oversight, and Donald Trump's DOJ lawyers, get ready for it, they agreed to the way this case should proceed. I'm going to suggest that the reason Donald Trump's DOJ lawyers agreed to proceed a particular way because they got caught with their hand in the national security cookie jar using a Signal app that they had no business to be using. We'll explain why that is in a minute. So they readily agreed with Judge Bosberg and with the plaintiffs who brought this lawsuit. And they said, wait a minute. We are already preserving these records, these, text, these chats on Signal talking about war plans and imminent military attacks. The reason they gave in so quickly, I suggest, is because the law is pretty clear. Under two relevant statutes, the Federal Records Act, the FRA, and the Administrative Procedures Act, the APA, these kind of records generated by federal government officials, executive branch officials, like texting and chatting in writing about war plans, must be retained. They must be retained and they must be forwarded to the National Archives. Why? Because all official government business is supposed to be captured, retained, and delivered to the archives so there is a record of it, and importantly, so people can file what are called FOIA requests, Freedom of Information Act requests. That is a law that promotes transparency in government. And what the plaintiffs, the group that brought this lawsuit, do, and they do it well and they do it aggressively, is they use FOIA requests to try to get at all the information they can regarding the operation of federal government, particularly of the executive branch. Why? So they can keep government officials honest. And that's why, as you said in your introduction, they jumped on this. They filed this lawsuit immediately. And let me just kind of take on three sentences that kind of sum up where we were, where we are, and where we're headed. First of all, just one sentence of about a 20-page complaint, a lawsuit filed by American Oversight, paragraph 61, for anybody scoring at home. Here's what they say. They say the defendant's use of Signal. By defendants here, we're talking about Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth and Tulsi Gabbard and John Ratcliffe and Marco Rubio and some others, the people who are on this chat group. Their use of Signal presents a substantial risk that they have used and continue to use Signal in other contexts, thereby creating records that are subject to the Federal Records Act, but are not being preserved as required by law. That sums up why they brought this lawsuit in one sentence. We know you're trying to hide and not preserve stuff as you are required by law to do, and we're going to sue you to make sure you do. And here is the most interesting sentence I think I'm going to read. It's a memo that was filed by Donald Trump's DOJ lawyers before the hearing commenced. Here's what they said. They said, Judge, a restraining order ordering us to collect up and preserve this Signal chat and deliver it to the National Archives. A restraining order is unnecessary because the defendant agencies are already taking steps to locate and preserve the Signal chat at issue, and at least one agency has already located, preserved, and copied into the federal record-keeping system a partial version of the chat. Why a partial version? I'm sure Judge Bosberg will get to the bottom of that. So after that concession, that whoops, it looks like we're caught, we're already doing it, Judge, the judge issued a minute order. And what I will say, in typical Judge Bosberg fashion, when I was reading the reporting about this 20-minute court hearing. It seemed like a very civil, even cordial affair. The judge started with something that is classic Bosberg. I've known Judge Bosberg for decades, worked closely with him, tried murder cases with him. He said, we're going to start today by trying to find common ground between the parties, because I think he sensed that DOJ would not be in a position to fight this one. And indeed, they found common ground, as we just reviewed in that DOJ memo. And here is the, give me one more minute, I know I'm going on here. Here is the order that Judge Bosberg issued. And also the reporting was, with kind of a smile on his face, he said to the DOJ lawyers, don't worry, this order will be in writing. An obvious callback to the litigation in which he's embroiled with Donald Trump's DOJ for unconstitutionally deporting Venezuelan migrants. And one of the things the DOJ attorneys argued is that, well, Judge, your first order was just an oral order. Well, as an aside, can I say, Brian, when a judge, for example, is presiding over a trial, a bench trial, and he says, I find you guilty, that's an oral order that has the force of law. When he says, I sentence you to 10 years, that's an oral order that has the force of law. And when he says, turn the damn planes around, he didn't say damn, that was my editorial addition. Turn the planes around and bring these illegally, unconstitutionally deported Venezuelan immigrants back to the United States. When he says it, it is just as enforceable as if it were in writing, but with a little nod to that ongoing, battle that's being waged in that other case presided over by Bosberg. He said with a smile on his face, according to the reporting, don't worry, this one will be in writing. And here's what he wrote. He said, as agreed by the parties in today's temporary restraining order hearing, the court orders that the defendants, Hegseth, Gabbard, Ratcliffe, Rubio, and the others, shall promptly make all best efforts to preserve all signal communications from March 11th through March 15th. And by March 31st, this is what I love because he's going to keep them on the hook. By March 31st, defendants shall file a status report with declarations, sworn statements, setting forth the steps that they have taken to implement such preservation, and this order shall expire on April 10th in the event everything is done to the satisfaction of the court. So again, this was a relatively staid affair where it looks like both parties sort of agreed on what was at issue and how it should be resolved.
Glenn, how relieved are you to hear that one of the people tasked with figuring out why it was that Jeffrey Goldberg was able to gain access into this group chat was Elon Musk?
Yeah, you know what? I wouldn't trust Elon Musk to make change for $1 for me. I would triple count to see if I got all 4 quarters. But look, we now have, a premier judge, highly experienced judge, fair, independent, impartial jurist in James Bosberg presiding over all of this. So he will keep them, if not on a short leash, he will keep them to a tight schedule to make sure these declarations are filed with the court so he, the judge, can be satisfied that the executive branch is not continuing to play games with signal chats or otherwise. But, the sooner Elon Musk is out of the business of American government, the better. And I hope that day comes sometime soon.
Well, it's also pretty ironic that the Trump administration felt the need to task someone, Elon Musk notwithstanding, to task someone with figuring out how it was that Jeffrey Goldberg gained access because they are so desperate not to just admit fault and acknowledge objective reality that Mike Waltz invited him in erroneously. And so instead they have to create this task force to get to the bottom of it. And maybe it might be the deep state. Maybe it might be Hugo Chavez who let them gain access. Maybe it's some FBI agents who have turned on the inside instead of just all of these conspiracy theories in service of figuring out why it was that a Trump administration official who very clearly just fucked up to explain that away.
Yeah, I'm sure, Trump administration officials who will be putting out the disinformation will somehow find a way for this to wind back to, I don't know, Hillary's emails and Benghazi,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But, there's another development that I thought was pretty interesting. A bipartisan pair, a Republican and a Democrat member of Congress, made a demand that the Department of Defense Inspector General look into what the heck went on here, and then we all realized, oh, wait, Trump fired the Department of Defense Inspector General, and I don't know that he has replaced that person yet, but ordinarily that would be somebody who would certainly be in a perfect position to investigate what kind of abuses may have taken place in the Department of Defense with Pete Hegseth and these other government officials. But, because Donald Trump got rid of our watchdogs on the inside of the executive branch, it looks like that's a hollow request from this pair of Republican and Democrat members of Congress.
Right, for all courtesy of an administration that purportedly is very focused on eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse. Got rid of the cops on the beat. Finally, Glenn, let's finish off with this. People are going to look at this lawsuit and say that there isn't really accountability that they have to face. I mean, yes, they have to preserve their documents, but really this is just another instance where the Trump administration can barrel ahead, can break the law. In this case, we're talking about a violation of the Presidential Records Act, can do something. I mean, even Jamie Raskin came out and said that being able to have these discussions, notwithstanding the fact that Jeffrey Goldberg gained access to it, having these discussions in an unsecured, at least as far as military operations are concerned, commercial texting app is an instance wherein they broke the law. Really, this is just another example of them being able to do that and facing no consequences. It's like they would rather ask for forgiveness than ask for permission. And so, even though they're not asking for forgiveness either, but do you view this as just another example of, okay, the Trump administration really can just do whatever they want, not face any accountability, and really get away with some slap on the wrist that will ultimately be just preserving some documents so that they can comply with the Presidential Records Act after the fact?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think you're dead on there, Brian, because even if there were rock solid evidence that some of these officials knowingly violated the law, let me ask you, who's going to prosecute them? Who's going to actually criminally investigate them?
Pam Bondi quite literally already came out and said that she's not willing to investigate any of this.
This dirty law firm of Bondi, Blanche, and Bove, the three top officials at the Department of Justice, present a real danger to the American people if they are going to decline to enforce the laws of our nation against what I often refer to as the ruling class criminals, the folks who have all of the power, all of the influence, all of the wealth, and all of the connections. So we are in for a very bumpy ride because I think part of the task of many of these nonprofits, and I would urge people to support these nonprofits in every way they can, whether it's American Oversight, the ACLU, Crew, Free Speech for People, there are many of them, and they're going into court every day doing our work, doing the work of the American people, and yet we're not paying them. Find any way to support them that you can and do so. It's going to be up to these nonprofits and state attorneys general and others to try to, I'm laughing because the phrase I'm about to utter, to try to keep the Trump administration honest, or at least catch them in their dishonesty, their illegality, and their unconstitutionality. That is going to be our enormous challenge during, this Trump administration.
Well, and look, as important as it is for folks to hold this administration to account in the courts, I know you and I are trying to do that on a daily basis with this show right here and with both of our channels. So for those watching, if you'd like to support our work, support our efforts more broadly, please make sure to subscribe. The links to both of our channels are right here on the screen. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.